Hi students, this is Julie. I wanted to do a quick run through of the Google Sheet activity that we did in class today, just so if you missed it or if you need a refresher on the steps that we used, you have a place where you can find that information. So first of all, a little bit of background. What we're working with can be found in your Google Drive, and if you go to Google Drive, what you'll want to do is find this big blue New button over on the left-hand side. Click on that. We're going to select a new Google Sheet, and you can just click right on there. I've already got one created here, so I'm going to go back to that. And if you've never worked with a spreadsheet before, some of the things you'll notice, there is a menu bar. So there's menu options and then some menu icons across the top of the screen. We'll be working with a couple of those things as we go along. And then the main part of the spreadsheet is a collection of rows and columns, and every row is numbered with a number, and every column is lettered. And so if we want to refer to an individual box on the spreadsheet, which we call a cell, we can name it by its column and row number. So for example, this first cell in the upper left-hand corner would be cell A1. And that's going to be important when we get to entering formulas into the spreadsheet. So spreadsheets are pretty powerful for working with sets of data, and we'll see today just a few of the things that spreadsheets can do. There's lots more to it, but we'll cover just a few of them. And so what we're going to start with is actually entering some data into the spreadsheet. And what I'm going to do to enter data is I'm going to just click in that upper left-hand corner box, and I would start entering my data. And so, for example, the first piece of data in the heart rate data that we had in class, this, by the way, is data set number 2 from the bottom of the data sheet that we used last week. The first piece of data was 92. I'm just going to type that in, hit enter, go on to my next one, until I have entered all 50 pieces of data into that first column. And I'm going to go ahead, I've actually already copied this whole list of data, and I'm just going to paste it in to column 1 just for the sake of time, or column A, I should say. And so now we want to do some different things with this data. So I'm going to skip over just to a couple of columns over, just to leave a little space in between. And I'm going to enter a few of the things that we're going to look at. So we're going to compute the mean, we're going to look at the mode, and then we're going to do the 5-number summary. So we're going to want the minimum value, we're going to want Q1, median, Q3, and the maximum. And I'm just typing these words in here and hitting enter in between each one. I can also do things with this just like I could in Word, like if I want to align all of these labels over on the right instead of on the left. Up here, there's a button that does that, very similar to what you would see in a text document. So I'm going to do that. And now what I need to do in order to compute these things is I need to start entering formulas. I need to tell the spreadsheet how to compute what I want to find. So the nice thing is that many of these statistical measures are already in the program. The spreadsheet knows how to compute these things. So for mean, for example, in this program, they happen to call it average. So whenever I enter a formula, the first thing I'm going to do is hit the equal sign. And that tells the spreadsheet that I'm going to enter a formula for a calculation. And after I hit the equals button, which is on a key that's up in the top row of keys on your keyboard, I'm going to start typing the word average. And as soon as I type just a couple letters of that, you can see that average pops up as an option on this little menu here. So I'm going to select just plain old average. There's a number of types of averages that we can compute, but we just want the normal average. And then what pops up is a little example of how I should tell the computer to compute the average. And basically what they want is they need to know what numbers am I trying to find the average of. And so there's 2 ways now that I can tell it which numbers to average. One thing I can do is I can go over to the column of data where I entered all those 50 pieces of data that I had, and I can just highlight them. So I can just click and run down that column and I can highlight those 50 pieces of data. And once I have them all highlighted, I'm just going to hit the enter or return button on the computer. And if I scroll back up here, now you can see that the computer has calculated the mean for that set of data. The other thing that I could have done is I could literally type in the range of values or of cells that I want to compute or to include in my calculation, and we'll do that for the mode. So when I go to do mode, again, I'm going to start with the equal sign because I need to tell the computer or the spreadsheet to do a calculation. And the mode function is just called mode. Type that in. Here it is on the menu. And again, here I need to tell it what numbers to find the mode of. And so for this one, I'm just going to type in that I want to include all of the numbers from cells A1 to A50. And I don't need to capitalize or anything here. I'm going to put a colon in between those two numbers or those two cell names. And then what I'm going to do is just hit enter. And that will then compute the mode for that range of numbers, which is pretty nice. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to enter formulas for the minimum, the median, and the maximum because those will work just like the two that we just did. So for minimum, I'm going to hit equals. I'm just going to click in the box here. Equals. You just have to type N-M-I-N. Minimum pops up. I'm going to type in A1 to A50. Enter. There's my minimum. Go down to median. Oops, forgot the equal sign. There's median. Again, A1 to A50. Enter. There's the median. And then finally maximum equals max. A1 to A50. Enter. There's my maximum value. So now I'll do the quartiles, and the quartile basically works the same way with one small difference. So I'm going to start off by hitting equals. I'm going to start typing quartile. Find that on the menu here. And now what's different about quartiles, I have to tell it two things. I have to tell it that I want to find the quartile for the data from A1 to A50. And then I have to tell it which quartile to find. So I want to find Q1, so I'm going to enter a 1 for the first quartile, and then I'm going to hit enter. And so then when I go to enter Q3, I'm actually going to do the exact same thing, except that I'll enter a 3 instead of a 1. Oop. Uh-oh, typed something wrong. Let's see here. I lost my formula. Oop. And now I've screwed up here. So I'm just going to undo this. Let's see. You know what? I'm just going to start over. I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to re-enter this quartile. A1 to A50. 3. There we go. The third quartile is 101. That makes sense. Okay, so even though it took a little bit of time to enter in those 50 values in that data set, once I have them in, I'm able to compute all of these different things. I didn't have to put them in order from smallest to largest, which is pretty nice. And now I can do other things with this data as well. So as an example, if I wanted to create a chart to represent this data, or a graph, Sheets has all different kinds of graphs that I can create using this data. So what I'm going to do to make this a little bit easier, and I don't have to do this, but it'll just make it easier, is I'm going to go back and select this column of data again. Scroll all the way down to the 50th value. And once I have this selected, I can go one of two places. One is up on this menu bar here. If I go over to this little icon that looks like a bar graph, if I hover over it, it says Insert Chart, and I can click on that. or I can go up to the Insert menu and I can choose Insert Chart. So they both do the same thing. They're just located in two different places. So I'm going to click on that, and you can see that immediately a histogram pops up. So the program kind of guesses that I might want to make a histogram with this data, and it just creates that and puts it in. If I don't want a histogram, I want something else for this data. Just moving this up on my page a little bit here. I can change the type of chart that it has created for me, which is another of the kind of cool things about Google Sheets. So I do want to make some changes to this histogram though. So a histogram is what I wanted, but I'm going to go ahead and change a few things here. So I've given myself a little bit more room. And now what I'm going to look at is over on the side here, there's the chart editor. And so first of all, underneath the data section of the chart editor, first thing that I can select here is the chart type. And under chart type, this is where if I didn't want to do a histogram, I could change it to a bar graph, or there are line graphs, pie charts, all kinds of different graph types that I could use for my chart. I want to leave this as a histogram, so I'm going to leave that here. If I hadn't selected my data before I created the chart, or if I had mistakenly selected the wrong cells, or I wanted to change the number of cells, maybe I added some data in, I could change my data range right here, and I can do that by typing it in, or I can click on this little select data range button and I can go over and I can highlight, but I'm going to cancel that. And then I can do lots of other things with the chart as well. If I click on Customize up at the top of the chart editor, I get a number of different options that pop up here. So chart style allows me to change, if I want to change the background color, I can do that. If I want to change the fonts on the chart, I can change the font. I'm going to go ahead and leave those where they are. Get rid of that. Under histogram, this is where I can change the, in Sheets they call it the bucket size. We called it a bin size when we made frequency tables. But basically it's, how is this horizontal axis divided up? And so they've taken the data and broken it down in a way that gives a lot of decimal values. If I wanted my bucket size to be a little rounder, I might pick fives, so I can break up the data into sets of fives. I could do tens, or I could pick any number I really want to. So I'm going to leave it at fives because I think that looks pretty nice. If I had outlier data that I knew of in the set, I could set sort of a cutoff point for the outlier data as well. And then there's lots of other customizing I can do. So for example, the title of this chart right now just says histogram. I don't really want that. So I can go into, oops, wrong one. I can go into this chart and axis titles section, and I'm going to change this title text from histogram to heart rate data. Again, I can change the font, I can change the font size, I can center it, I can change the color, all kinds of things I can do with this. And then I might also notice that on the histogram itself, there are no labels on the horizontal and vertical axes. So I'm going to change that as well. So I'm going to go up to the chart type, or the title type here, and change from chart title to horizontal axis title. Type that in, and that's going to be heart rates. Okay, you can see that pop up on the table now. And then I'm going to change the vertical axis to number of subjects. Again, I can format that if I want to, but that looks pretty good. Close that up. I can also do things like, right now the bars are all blue. If I wanted to change the color of the bars, I could do that. I'll leave them blue though. If I had multiple sets of data represented on this same graph, I might choose to add a legend or a key to this graph, but I don't need that here. I could also do things like change the font and the color, or the minimum and maximum value on the horizontal axis. I could do the same thing with the vertical axis. And then if I wanted to add more, maybe I wanted to break this up into more guidelines on either axis, I can do that as well. I'm going to leave this at auto. And then I can change their color. I can do, again, some other things to sort of customize the look of my chart. So this is pretty much what we did with the data for this data set. And we'll take a look at some of the other tools that are available in Google Sheets later. But the last thing to know about this is that the really strong suit of Google Sheets is that it allows you to work collaboratively with other people. And so if you were doing a group project, say, and you wanted a number of group members to all have access to the same set of data and the same charts that you were creating, you can go up to the Share button and you can click on it. And you do have to give it a name before you can share it. So we're going to call this heart rate data. And then I can enter the email addresses of other people that I want to share this document with. And they can actually go in and work on it at the same time that I do, which is a little bit weird when you're in the document, but it's also kind of cool. When I share it, I have a choice here. If I click on this little pencil icon, I can allow other people to edit or make changes to the document. I can allow them just to make comments on it, or I can allow them to look at it and not actually add anything or change anything to the document. So depending on why I was sharing this with other people, I might select one of these options here. I'm going to leave this one as can edit. I can enter an email for someone that I wanted to share this with, and then I would click done. Okay. So that's all for now. Again, lots and lots of tools that you can use with Google Sheets. This sort of just scratches the surface, but it gives you a pretty good look into some of the basic things that you can do if you were writing a report or doing a project for a class, or taking this into the workplace. Being able to work with a spreadsheet is a great job skill. So that's it for today. Tune in or look for a second follow-up video with some more Google Sheets tools.